Yes, so this is the audit meeting of West Devon for Tuesday the 7th of December at 9:30. So we'll start off with apologies for absence.
We have apologies for absence from Councillor Richards. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Item number 2 is declarations of interest. Members are invited to declare any personal or disclosable pecuniary interest, including the nature of and extent of such interest they may have in any items to be considered at this meeting. Does anybody have any items to declare? No, thank you. Items requiring urgent attention, we have none. It goes on to agenda item number 4, which is confirmation of the minutes of the meeting held on the 2nd of November 2021. Is everyone happy that we accept these?
So moved, Chair.
Yep, okay, thank you. They're accepted. Item number 5. Item number 5 is the external auditor appointment to be introduced by Councillor Edmonds.
Thank you, Chair. Well, the report clearly sets out the requirement for the Council to appoint an external auditor with a recommendation that the Council opts into the national arrangement for the procurement and appointment of external auditors by the 11th of March 2022 deadline. The alternative is for the Council to establish an auditor panel and conduct a procurement exercise. This is not recommended as it will be a far more resource-intensive process, and without the bulk buying power of the national sector-led procurement is likely to be more costly than the national arrangement. Attached to the report is a letter from the LGA advising that the national framework remains the best option that councils can choose. It's highly likely that most of the Devon authorities, if not all of them, will opt into the national arrangement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Okay then, so we have the one recommendation that the West Devon Borough Council opts into the national arrangement for the procurement and appointment of external auditors through the public sector audit appointments. Can I have a proposal for that, please?
Happy to propose, Chair.
Councillor Enders is first, so Councillor Ball, I'll take you as a seconder. So
happy to do that.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a nice easy one for us. Item number 6, update and progress of the 2021-22 internal audit plan, report of the internal audit manager. Councillor Edmonds is going to introduce this, then Dominic take over.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, as part of the internal auditing process, Audit Committee receives updates on the progress made on the current year's audit plan. This is the first report for 2021-22 and sets out the work carried out by internal audit up to the 5th of November against this year's audit plan. That was agreed by this committee back in April. Progress has, once again, been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. One half of the audit team has continued to provide assistance with the processing of the various business grants and other financial support made available by the government via the local authority to those who have suffered as a result of lockdown restrictions. As a result, a number of audits have not taken place. However, as at the 5th of November, out of the 31 planned audits, 4 had been completed with final reports issued, 1 was at draft report stage, and 8 were underway. In addition, final reports were issued on 5 audits from the 2020-21 plan that were being completed at the start of the audit year. Details of all these are outlined at Appendix A and B. Overall, and based on work performed to date during 2021-22, internal audit is able to provide reasonable assurance on the adequacy and effectiveness of the authority's internal control environment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Edmonds. Dominic?
Thank you, Chair. Normally members would receive my first progress report earlier in the autumn. But as we know, the audit committees were taken up with final accounts and reports from external audit. This report is in its normal format, with Appendix A showing where we are as at the 5th of November with each of the audits in the 2021-22 plan. Appendix B contains details from all the final reports issued since my annual report that I presented to you in the summer, and covers both those audits that were carried over from last year and those that we've completed from this year's plan. It provides you with the major audit findings from each of the final reports issued since June 21 and the responses that were received from officers to our recommendations. On pages 18 and 19 of your papers, you will see that like many, internal audit has continued to suffer the effects of the pandemic, and progress of the plan has been restricted. This is in part mostly due to Matt, one of my team, continuing to assist with processing grant applications. This has left my other team member, Julie, to complete 2021 work during this period and make inroads into this year's plan, but liaising with officers so that we don't interfere with important COVID responses and operations. Whilst it was hoped that Matt would return to carry out audit work on a more full-time basis, by now, the latest position is that there's still more work on business grants to do. You will see that I've outlined the number of days that we spent on unplanned COVID-related tasks, and this figure is likely to increase. I draw your attention to page 18 of the papers and the request made by South Hams to approach Devon Audit Partnership for additional audit resource to backfill the time lost by Matt. Unfortunately, we've lost a number of good experienced staff through retirements, etc. at Devon Audit Partnership and undertaken a major recruitment exercise over the last few months, which has led to a number of new members of staff joining, and arrangements are in hand to utilise some of these for your audit plan. It is still my intention to undertake a review of the audit plan soon with Lisa as Section 151 officer and the Director of Governance and Assurance in an attempt to identify audits that could go ahead in the remainder of the year and those that may be delayed or even cancelled. Based on the work, as Councillor Edmonds has pointed out, I can give reasonable assurance as to your internal control environment. I'm happy to take questions and do my best to provide answers now, or go away and provide you some answers in due course. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dominic. Do we have any questions? Councillor Ball?
Yeah, just following on from Dominic's report, and thank you for that. You obviously said that you can provide reasonable assurance that things will be carried on, which is great. Is there any particular area that might be at risk with the implications on man hours that are not available at the moment?
Thank you, Councillor Ball. There's some high-risk areas. It's a combination of audit resource, but also, as I've said, is the circumstances with the officers and their workloads at the moment. I'm thinking along the lines of contract management. Obviously, officers are working hard on waste collection contracts and the leisure management as our leisure operator tries to recover from the events of the last 18 months. I'm trying to prioritise the audits, and that's why I want to review the plan with Section 151 and Director of Governance and Assurance, so that together, it's not my decision what necessarily, but I feed into and get feedback from them as to which audits they think should go ahead. Hopefully we can complete more than we did last year.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy with that.
Any other questions? Lisa, do we need to mention anything about the internal services review at all? Would that be useful?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So there is a service review of the Revenues and Benefits Service, so that covers business rates, council tax and benefits. And the lady that is leading that review, we have asked if she can ensure that all of the internal audit points which have been picked up by Dominic's team and are in this report are also reflected in that Revenues and Benefits Service review, just to make sure we've captured all of those recommendations as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ball?
Thank you, Chair. It's just one other one. I asked this question in the pre-meeting. The recommendation is that we note the progress, but obviously there's also a and approve the key issues arising. So I think it was useful clarification when I asked the question before. I think it might be useful clarification for the meeting now. I think it was Lisa who answered it last time.
Yes, thank you. So yes, the recommendation is asking if there are any key actions arising out of Dominic's internal audit report. So, for example, if that's anything that members would like further work done on, or any recommendations that they would like to make to another committee with regards to the internal audit work. Thank you.
A follow-up, Chairman. Thank you. Because normally we just note this item, don't we, Chair? But I believe that you had some training recently where something was identified with that. Is that correct?
No, this came up in our chairman's briefing. I'm not too sure this is definitely the answer, but it may be, because it's one of the questions I was asked. I was carried out as part of the Devon Audit Partnership.
The external assessment we every 5 years, and the 5 years was up, and the chair was invited to be interviewed by one of the assessors.
I always like the way they say that when they say you're invited to, I don't think you've got much option. But then, but actually, this actually came up actually about as well as noting it, do we actually approve matters? And I thought it's interesting that something, I don't know, but this is the answer, because really it's just a coincidence that the wording has changed following that. But then, but they did say that it came up across quite a few councils that quite often in the looking at internal audits, quite a few items are really up for sort of discussion and approval, but at the end of the day it just says noted. So that's probably why the wording's been changed, I'd imagine, but then maybe some other reasons. So, okay, I did notice there was lots in there about commercial property, but then we've got a section on commercial property later on, so we can, if any questions about that will come up, then maybe they'll come up later on. But also to remind everybody, when we are discussing commercial property, be careful not to slip into part two, and if we do, then we'll have to move into part two. Councillor Yelland.
Yeah, it's just really to ask the question. I think I can sort of work out the answer, but I think it's helpful to ask. On page 32, which talks about cash collection and online payments, then there is a substantial assurance, and then there's the management response, or the audit findings, sorry, the management response. And this is to do with collections from pay and display machines, whereby there is sort of the audit finding and then the management response. Are we satisfied that that is robust enough security? That the provisions we have in place are robust enough?
From an audit point of view, we're not looking. We do not necessarily expect there to be, 100% security. It's the best security given the circumstances, and it was felt that this was the best that could be achieved, and satisfied, adequate security.
I'll come back to such mention on that. And I was also thinking about the sort of the safety, essentially, of the locality, well, the officers, engagement officers that do actually empty the machines. Is that taken into account? If they're carrying cash around?
That I cannot necessarily answer directly. I can find out, but from my auditors, if we actually did look at their actual safety, the security of the staff whilst they're undertaking their duties, I'll find out for you.
Lisa, do you know the answer to that at all?
I don't, I'm afraid, Chair. And just looking at the comments, there is on the second bullet point down on page 32, it says procedures are in place to collect and securely count and bank the cash collected. I mean, my understanding is that's done. I think they collect the cash. There's a secure vehicle in which that's held until it is brought back to be counted and banked. But yes, we can find out more details on that. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly a good question, Councillor Yellen. So I think it's well worth looking into that and maybe reporting back to the Audit Committee. I probably imagine with COVID, a lot more people probably pay on their phones now than they ever used to, but there'll still be a lot of money in those cash machines, so it'd be worth
Yeah, Chair, I think the greatest risk, I think, will be when they're actually taking the money out of the machines and somebody jumping them or whatever the phrase is these days. So, yeah, we can look into that and see what arrangements there are.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay then, so we just have the one recommendation. It is recommended that the progress made against the 2021-22 internal audit plan and any key issues arising are noted and approved. We're all happy that we note and approve? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Edmonds, and thank you, Mr. Measures, for that. Item number 7, sundry debt update, report of the Head of Finance. Back to you, Councillor Edmonds.
Thank you, Chair. The report provides members with an update of sundry debt as at the 31st of October 2021, which falls into 3 categories. Sundry debts, which is estates management, licensing and housing. Housing benefit, overpayment recoveries from those still in receipt of benefit, and housing benefit overpayment recoveries from those no longer in receipt of benefit. The report sets out the debt position in each of the 3 categories, and you will note that the total outstanding in each category has reduced since February 2021. Perhaps not surprisingly, in the current climate, £33,000 of sundry debt relates to outstanding commercial rents, and the assets team are working with tenants to agree repayment plans to recover rent arrears. Debt write-offs for the first 6 months of the year amount to £6,600. Moving on to housing benefit overpayment recoveries from those still in receipt of benefit, the majority of overpayments are as a result of delaying claimants notifying the council of a change of circumstances. Prompt recovery action of these debts, whilst people are still in receipt of housing benefit, improves the likelihood of full recovery. And housing benefit overpayments from those no longer in receipt of benefit has seen a decrease in the amount outstanding from £329,000 in February 21 to £281,000 at the end of October, with just over £8,800 written off since 1st of April this year. Repayment plans are in place for £174,000 worth of the overall debt, and these are carefully monitored to ensure they remain on course. So finally, Chair, the report recommendation is that the Audit Committee note the position in relation to sundry debt. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edmonds. Any questions? Councillor Ball?
Just a comment, really, Chair. I think, in the circumstances that we're in, and lots of people having lots of challenges through COVID and a variety of other things, the fact that the overall debt has gone down, I think is a really positive thing for us as an authority. And obviously, it would be nice to see it come down more. But I'm sure. But I think you could easily expect that it would have gone up. And so I think that's a positive thing. And actually, it's a reflection on people out there as well as us. That people are trying to do the right thing, and we appreciate that as an authority. I just wanted to make that comment, really. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Renders?
Just a very quick one. One of the biggest areas we've got in is people receiving benefit. Obviously, that wouldn't have been impacted as much by the COVID outbreak. And I know that the records state here that the majority of it is overpayment. I'm just curious to see how much of it is a result of people that don't choose to pay us, and is there anything we can do? Do we get attachment of their benefit or whatever? It's only percentage-wise. You just see, it's a big amount, but to me they weren't. I mean, I get people that were running businesses and we didn't collect rents because obviously they weren't trading. I get people that were working and then furloughed and they weren't getting all the money that they normally would get. And a lot of the people that were receiving benefits, how often, I suppose a supplement to that would be, how often do we check, or do we just rely on them coming back to us and being honest about their circumstance?
Sorry. And I'm not sure of the actual percentage split. Some of a small percentage, I think it is a small percentage, would be perhaps council error, but I think it's fair to say the majority would be around the change in circumstances. Lisa, I don't know if you've got any further information on that point.
That's right, Chair. So we have various ways that we can collect those overpayments. If a customer is still in receipt of housing benefit, we can make an arrangement from them whereby we recover the overpayment from their ongoing benefit. If a customer is not still in receipt of housing benefit, we can do things like attachment of earnings. So we directly deduct that from through their actual wage receipt through their employer. And obviously we have other methods of collecting that debt, whether that's coming to an instalment repayment plan with the customer and agreeing that. We have some customers that are, paying that back over a long period of time in terms of affordability of being able to pay those overpayments back. But yes, we certainly can do attachment of earnings, and we do that.
Indeed, on page 51, on the table there, showing those no longer in receipt status, towards the bottom it does say direct earning attachment planned and direct earning attachment in place, and I think that's for about £27,000 worth. So that is part of the recovery process, certainly. Yeah.
Just another quick one. Only curiosity. When obviously during the pandemic, one of the notes on here was that we throttled back, if you like. We weren't chasing as much debt. Did we still continue to chase the overpayments and people receiving benefit, or did we draw a line under it all and because of lack of resource couldn't do that?
We didn't chase that actively in the early months, so right at the very start of the pandemic, in the first couple of months leading up to the summer. But after the summer, that's when we started actively chasing. And the letters that were going out to our customers, as well as saying, we very much understand the difficult financial circumstances that customers find themselves in, that with those letters there were ways that we could help as well. So, for example, we were offering customers to do like a benefit eligibility check to make sure they were getting all the benefits that they were entitled to, and other ways that we could help them, whether that was things like making sure they were getting the right amount of universal credit, and offering signposting them to organisations like Citizens Advice Bureau as well. So those letters that we sent out were letters not only chasing the debt, but also offering ways to help and signposting them to organisations that could help them as well.
Brilliant. I like that one, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Now, I must admit, I was going through some of these reports. I was just thinking, actually, in my years with the council, actually, how good our reports have actually become, not just in audit, but across all the committees, that you can actually read things through, and actually most things are, usually you go through and you end up with a load of questions, but now you write your questions down, and as you go through the report, your questions get answered, and I think it just goes to show the good standard of our reports across the board, actually. And I like this one, actually, because it's like lots of pie charts and bar charts. It makes it very easy at first glance to see what's going on without having to read all the detail and trying to work it out yourself. It explains it, then has a nice bar chart to finish it off with. It does, and so it's very good. So are we all happy that we note this?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Move on to item number 8, which is the Treasury Management Mid-Year Report, 2021-22, Report of the Finance Business Partner. Councillor Edmonds, back to you again.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, the report in front of you today is the mid-year review of the Treasury Management Strategy agreed by the Council on the 30th of March 2021. A further review will be carried out at the end of the Council's financial year. The Council's investment priorities are to ensure security of capital and liquidity and to obtain an appropriate level of return consistent with the Council's risk appetite, which is risk averse. The Council held £28.7 million of investments at the end of September, and the investment yield for the first 6 months of the year was 0. against a benchmark rate of 0.05%. It's impossible to earn the level of interest rates commonly seen in previous decades since the bank rate was cut to 0.10% in March 2020, especially with liquidity remaining a priority during the uncertainty created by the pandemic. As a consequence, the current investment interest forecast is £24,370 for the current financial year, leaving a shortfall against budget of £80,951. The budget setting process for next year will propose a reduction of the 22-23 investment interest budget to £25,321. The report confirms that the Council has complied with the Treasury limits and prudential indicators set out in the annual Treasury strategy statements, and the relevant details can be found at Appendix B of the report. Section 10 of the report informs us that SIPFA planned to publish new principles in December 2021 that Council should adopt from the 1st of April 2022 in their capital, investment and treasury management strategies for 2022-23. So finally, Chair, it's recommended that the Audit Committee resolves to endorse the contents of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edmonds. Questions, members? Sorry, Lisa, is it possible for you to tell us a bit more about the SIPRA published new principles for April next year?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. We did hear yesterday that we think SIPFA may now be planning a soft launch of those new regulations for 23-24. So it looks like they will delay the implementation of that for one financial year and do a soft launch in 23-24. I think what it means for us is we will have to include some new indicators in our strategies around things like liability benchmarking. So in terms of the amount of debt that the council has, this will be the same for all councils nationally. And we will have to, on an annual basis, we will have to give some evidence to our external auditors about the reasons for us holding investment properties. So those are our new regulations which will be coming in, but it looks like they won't be coming in now until 23-24 with a soft launch as well. So we are awaiting some announcements from SIPFA and the government department responsible for that. That should come out just before Christmas, and we'll find out what it is we need to do in there. So I think it means we'll have more prudential indicators that we'll need to present in our reports to members. And probably the external auditors would probably do a bit more work on investment properties in terms of the new regulations that are coming out. But we don't envisage that to be any problems for us. It's just a bit of extra work, I think. Thank you.
It was interesting when they did the Redmond review, wasn't it, that going forward everything would be simplified. And as we do go forward, it just means more and more work for finance teams and internal auditors and external auditors.
I think that's true, Chair. Yes, and SIPFA are always saying about simplifying our accounts, and I know Mrs. Henstock and her team do a lot of work on trying to make the accounts more simplified. But when there are statutory notes that we have to include, it makes it very difficult to get those accounts down to less than 100 pages, really.
Yeah, especially when they come up with comments, recommendations. Actually, we have to explain why we've invested in investment property. I'm sure the one-line response isn't going to satisfy. We wanted some income on a regular basis. But I don't know. So, if there's no other questions, members, we just have to note that. So endorse the contents of the report. Is everyone happy with that? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Edmonds. We're going to give you a rest now, actually. Yes. So, item number 9. The strategic risk update report of the head of strategy and projects. I believe the leader of the council is going to introduce this and hand over to Neil Hawke.
Thank you, Chair. Members are asked to consider the risk register, which is attached to the paper that's been circulated at Appendix A. Members should note that this register covers strategic risks, as each service within the council will individually hold their own risk register for operational risks. The appendix sets out the performance management framework and the process and methodology used for scoring the relative risks. It's recommended that members look particularly closely at those scoring 16 or above. I'd like to draw your attention to the summary of strategic risks chart, which has been adapted following feedback from members to show the history and where the profile of risks has changed. Note that one strategic risk has moved into the red zone. This is in direct response to the pandemic and new ways of working during that period, and our reliance on IT systems coupled with the danger of cyber attacks, and also with national problems that are affecting waste collection operations across various areas, including ours. Groups of officers will be working on these in order to mitigate those risks. Members are also asked to note that one risk has been removed, that of the 3 weekly waste collection following the finish of the examination of that and the trial. Please note the current risks and the progress made to mitigate them. The Audit Committee may, of course, make recommendations to the Hub Committee on amendments or additions. Members, be very happy between myself and Mr. Hawke to take questions.
Thank you, Leader. Mr. Hawke, would you like to add anything before we go to questions? No. Okay. Members, questions? Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, the Leader referred to the one item I'm sure that expected us to ask questions on. I mean, just before I ask about that, I mean, the layout of this report's really excellent. You know, as the Chairman was referring to previous reports and how they're laid out and help us to understand things. This is really excellent, and I want to thank you for the way that you've laid this out. And you can see very clearly that direction of risk is always useful to see as an underlying indicator of things. So with that said, if we could come to the business continuity risk, which is obviously very high and going up because of the reasons the Leader indicated. And obviously within the report, it's very honest. You know, the financial and the service quality are both indicated as potentially catastrophic, which obviously should raise concerns. But if we could have some background information on this, I mean, I asked about this yesterday in the briefing. Two-part question, really. So firstly, related to the cyber attack side of things, you know, what are we doing to mitigate that? I know we've all recently done training, which I think was really useful, actually, to remind ourselves, even though some of those things we might know, it's good to remind ourselves of that. But what else is going on in the background? And secondly, obviously, the waste collection side of things. You know, we haven't had much information recently around that. You know, have things improved on that a bit? So it'd be useful to know both parts of that in a little bit more detail, please, because obviously, particularly with the waste management, that's one of our front-facing services and something that we all as members will get asked about. So I don't mind who the question goes to, whether it's the Leader or yourself, Neil, but I'll leave that open. Thank you.
I'll defer to Mr. Hawke, if that's okay.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. So in terms of the first element of that risk, in terms of cyber attacks, I mean, it's one of the reasons why the risk has gone to red in this month, I think, as the report sets out, purely because as a council, we've been working very closely with other councils and learning lessons from them. You would have seen nationally, a number of councils have had successful cyber attacks, and it's taken them many months, you know, close to 12 months, one council, to recover from that, and millions of pounds. So actually what we've done is they've shared their learning with us, which has been really beneficial for us and has enabled us to start to develop a framework for what else we need to put in place. It's always going to be a risk. I think that's the world we live in now. I think that is the case. But there are things we do. I mean, we do have annual penetration testing, so we bring somebody in every year, and they spend days trying to hack our systems. So we have these sorts of activities ongoing anyway, and we have done for a number of years. And I think so the reason the risk has gone to red is not because we feel that we're at any more risk than we were the last time. I think our understanding of how much it could cost us and how long it could take us to recover has increased.
Before you come to the second one, Chairman, may I just come back on that? So it's more about the potential risk should the wheels come off, to use a colloquialism.
Absolutely. And if we look in business continuity in its widest sense, and IT is a key aspect, as Councillor Jory said as part of the intro, we are so reliant on it. I mean, as an organisation, we're all working from home, members, officers, on a regular basis. And we're changing our systems. You know, we are changing our systems at the moment, which is another reason why the risk profile has just increased slightly. Because until we embed those systems and have sufficient plans in place to ensure that we can recover them, we can't do the next stage of work, of working with services to update their business continuity plans.
Thank you for that. And on the waste management side of things?
In terms of the waste management side of things, again, so we know that there has been, there is a national HGV driver shortage, which does, I mean, I'm just looking at my notes because Sarah Moody, our head of waste management, has provided a bit of an update. But in terms of the impact on West Devon, there has been a couple of sickness instances which have affected collections from properties. I think 1,200 properties were affected by 2 rounds in November. So that was sickness related. And obviously, this is a risk register. We are looking ahead. We don't know what the new variants of COVID will bring or the existing variants of COVID and the impact that may have on the availability of drivers and therefore the ability for us to deliver our core services.
Can I add to that, Councillor Ball, that I think that anecdotally, as far as I can see, I think things have improved over recent weeks. And I've certainly noticed that the teams that are out there are working really, really hard. They've worked fantastically right the way through the pandemic. They've then had this issue thrown at them. And I've seen the trucks out on Saturdays catching up and doing extra bits of work to recover whatever recycling hasn't been collected. I think the teams that are out there from FCC are doing a fantastic job. I am concerned as to how long they can keep up that effort because they've been working really hard for a long time now. But I've noticed less comment about missed collections, and I think that they seem to be dealing with it really, really well. But we're keeping a close eye, and I know Mr. Molyneux and Sarah Moody are on top of it and are liaising with them really closely.
Any other questions? Councillor Yelland?
Yeah, just going back to the IT potential IT issue. In the line about what are we doing to reduce the risk, it says having 2 headquarter locations is a main mitigating factor, but I think that is essentially referring to the risk regarding the IT rather than the physical buildings. That's what I'm understanding anyway from that. But I think my question is that while we've got people who are looking to see or testing the system then to see how effective it is against hacking and people actually getting in and having access and causing problems who shouldn't do. So I think my question is how successful is that? Has anybody been successful? I'm not sure if that's a question that can be asked in part 1, actually. Whether it should go to part 2, I don't know. But has there been any success in anybody breaking through and causing harm and damage? And if so, how significant was it? And was it able to be resolved quickly?
Thank you, Councillor Yelland. No success. We haven't been subject to any successful incidents so far. I mean, I am proposing, but given this risk has gone to a red risk, that we could add it to a future informal member briefing, because as you quite rightly said, these sorts of discussions may not be the sorts of ones we want to have in public forum, but certainly, yeah, so far that we haven't had successful incidents from outside the organisation. And I think that's largely down to, staff are well trained, members are well trained. As was mentioned earlier by Councillor Ball, all of us have been on our cyber security training, and we're all much more aware of what to look out for now. We're looking for those suspicious links because that's a route in. You click on the suspicious links, and it can download all sorts of weird and wonderful software. So I think we're in a good place, but there's always more you can do as an organisation.
Yeah, I think it's just, obviously we, as councillors and as members of staff, we've all had the training now. I take it everyone's done it. Has that been confirmed? Yeah, it has. So, no, it's, it wasn't it wasn't like a 5-minute one. It was 45 minutes to an hour. So it wasn't we all had to go through. But again, we always got to be aware of what's going on. I mean, just talking to Lisa yesterday, I mean, Lisa's probably the one who gets the most emails, which may be a bit suspicious because she's the one with the control of the finance. So push the button and get somebody else to sign it and the money gets transferred, doesn't it? But then it could come through any one of us at any stage, couldn't it? So we can still be aware of that. Yeah, very good report. Again, I like the layout. It's very easy to follow through. I do like the colour coding that systems the council's been adopting over recent years. It's very, very good. I did wonder about sort of things like ransomware. If ransomware did actually get into our system, who was actually responsible for making the decisions on that? Do we have a policy on that?
I mean, it would be, we would obviously have that discussion with the senior leadership team and the leadership of both councils. But yes, that's certainly an area we need to explore in terms of what our approach is.
Mm. So it's only simple. I just wondered if we had a policy to sort of say, yeah, it would be the, senior leadership team and the two leaders of the councils. And no, we haven't, but I just wondered.
We can check that, Chairman, with the head of IT.
Don't give me any details. That's just a yes or no would have done. Yeah. Fine. Okay. And something else that, following Councillor Ball's question about the waste and what Councillor Joy said, it's interesting in our estate, we didn't have our waste collected last week or this week at the moment. And the reason being is the main Crediton Road was closed because there was a major burst pipe, which closed the road for 3 days. And it was interesting, at the other end of the road, the highways decided to start digging up the road, so actually 3 estates are completely blocked in, which I don't think anybody raised the issue about what happened if you needed an ambulance or something, but so cars were parked all over Oakhampton with people walking. But the thing I noticed, actually, because usually when it first started with waste not being collected, as councillors, you get lots of phone calls. We used to get lots of phone calls. And I thought it was interesting that 3 main estates in Oakhampton didn't have their waste collected last week, haven't had it collected this week yet. But I haven't received any phone calls or messages. So I think people are beginning to get the pattern of it will be collected at some stage, to leave it out. And so I think people are beginning to sort of bear with us on that. It's not necessarily our fault. Whereas at the start of it, people were phoning in and saying, my waste hasn't been collected, and it's now 4 o'clock, and they usually come at 7 o'clock this morning. So now I think people are getting used to just the way the world's operating today. So, okay, so do we have any other questions?
On that point, because I think, picking up the leader's point about improvement and your comment, and I'm sure the other members here would agree with what you've just said. I mean, we've very, people do understand that, we're facing challenges, and which is welcomed. But I think, as I referred to my question, it would be quite nice to have some sort of formal update of where we're up to. If we are asked, I find it useful that if people say to me, "Oh, it's been a bit tough, but we understand this and that. What's the latest?" It would be quite nice to have that. I haven't had anything formally for a little while, and it would be quite nice to have that. That's yourself, leader, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. We'll take that away and we'll definitely arrange that. So thank you for that. It's a helpful comment.
I mean, it's just something read out in the members' bulletin. Mr. Hawke.
Just to quickly update members that hot off the press from Mrs. Moody is during the month of November, our missed collections were at 157 out of 100,000 collections. So for every 100,000 collections, 157 were missed, which I would say is pretty good going. I know, frustrated if you're one of the people that's had your missed collection, but I would say that's certainly good news. So that's 77 above the national target. So
Sorry, through you, Chairman. That it's bits like that are really useful in something that could come to us. That would be great. Thank you.
Councillor Yelland?
I think it is just worth saying as well, though, that, because the public sometimes might think, oh, it's not worth reporting it, but it is very important that it is reported. A miscollection is reported on the website, because that then will go, that'll get picked up and dealt with accordingly. So I think it is worth just really reminding people, or reminding members as well, that to tell residents, please do report a missed collection.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good point. I think if you left your rubbish out today, it could be anywhere in West Devon, but
Might be in Southampton.
okay. Oh, the other thing is to point out, as I thought about, so within the audit committee, we do have usually a regular presentation, don't we, from just about IT and cyber sort of intelligence, that sort of thing. So it wasn't that long ago. We had the last one, was it? So I don't think we need to book in another one just yet, do we? No.
The March agenda has already got 13 items on it, I think. So it's a fairly long agenda in March, but we could always look to do that at one of the summer audit committees.
I was just thinking, when did we have the last one? It didn't seem that long ago.
Yeah, it's normally Paul Woodward that comes along and.
Yeah, so it wasn't that long ago, so I think maybe we don't need it necessarily that soon.
Yeah, that falls within the resources or my portfolio. IT, or perhaps it is, if it's risk, I guess it's the leaders. But I was just going to suggest we're probably due to have a advisory group meeting, perhaps early in the new year. And maybe it's something we could discuss and perhaps put together and report back, even though, before March, perhaps some sort of update to the audit committee, some perhaps hopefully reassurance. But I'm not sure whether it falls into Councillor Jory's patch or whether it can wash through the advisory group, which does include, I think Mr. Hawke is nodding that it can fall into the resources AG. So if that's helpful, we could bring that into that AG meeting, which will be early in the year after the government announces the financial settlement, and we could perhaps pick it up in that and do some work around that and report back to audit in writing.
That'd be fine. I mean, it could fall into anything, and it really could fall into sort of, not anything, but many things. It could be members' training, it could be informal council. But if you'd like to take that on, we shall pass it to you. Thank you. Councillor Yelland.
It was really more a comment, actually, just picking up what you were saying there. I think given the success of our Agile Working, which we've been well ahead of the game on getting set up from several years ago, so we are in advance of a lot of places in terms of how we deliver our Agile Working, but running alongside that then, of course, is the much higher risk because we're more dependent on IT. So I do think that actually it is something that absolutely does have to be within audit on a regular basis, that we do need that clear update and, identifying the strengths and weaknesses.
I think so. But it'll also be coming up in internal audits, won't it, when our strengths and weaknesses as well. So, yes.
I was just going to say, is there any chance that through comms we could do something about the waste collection guys? Because obviously they do a fantastic job and have done under seriously difficult circumstances for the past 18 months. It'd be nice to give them some of the recognition they deserve. And because they do get a bad press, and you only get the complaints when somebody's bins are missed or whatever like that. But they, on the whole, they do a phenomenal job, and it'd be nice to see them get some recognition.
I agree. So, I mean, the leader said he'd be looking at it anyway. So, can you include that?
Yeah,
as
we'll
well?
definitely pick that up. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. So, the recommendation was that the audit committee consider the strategic risk register set out in Appendix A. So, we're all happy that, well, not say happy, but we're all content that we've considered that. I do prefer the word noted and things like that. So, so all in agreement with that? Yes. Thank you. Thank you, leader, and thank you, Mr. Hawke, on that. Over to item number 10, investment property update and monitoring report of the Director of Place of Enterprise. Just to remind us to make sure we don't go into part two on this. But if we do, we'll have to move into part two, but just be aware of questions you may be asking. Councillor Edmonds, you're going to introduce, then over to Mr. Brooke.
Yep, thank you, Chair. Where the report provides the Audit Committee with an opportunity to review the performance and ongoing risks of the 4 investment properties purchased by the Council since 2018 at a cost of £21.5 million. I think you'll agree, and picking up on your earlier comments, Chair, Mr. Brooke has put together a very comprehensive report, some nice pie charts in there as well, Chair, supported by a summary of the portfolio performance in Appendix 1. But let me briefly highlight a few key points by way of a reminder. A net revenue income of £300,000 per annum is currently generated as an ancillary benefit of the investment property portfolio, which is used to support the delivery and improvement of frontline services. This represents an average net portfolio income of 1.3% against a minimum target of 1% set out in the investment strategy. 10% of rent from the investment property portfolio goes into a revenue earmarked reserve, which can be used to fund void periods, management costs, and repairs. The reserve has a predicted balance of £417,000 at the end of the current financial year. A spread of lease expiries and breaks have been achieved. However, there are certain points, particularly in 2028, at which there is a concentration of lease events, and the details are set out in Appendix 1. Any future property acquisitions with significant lease events in 2028, in 2028 should be avoided to improve the balance of lease expiry dates and break clauses across the portfolio. The COVID crisis has, of course, had an impact on tenants, and this is reviewed in Appendix 2, which is one of the exempt documents that the Chair has referred to. The portfolio was revalued in March 2021 as part of the annual valuation for the statement of accounts. And again, details are shown in Appendix 3, which is also an exempt item. Current government guidance significantly constrains the use of PWLB funds to the acquisition of investment property for economic... current government guidance significantly constrains the use of PWLB funds to the acquisition of investment property for economic regeneration within West Devon. This has reduced the number of opportunities that can be considered for investment. Section 5 helpfully looks to the future management of the portfolio and the investment approach should other opportunities be considered. In conclusion, Chair, the report recommendation is that the Audit Committee notes the performance and risks of the investment property portfolio to date. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edmonds. Mr. Brooke, would you like to add anything to that before we go to questions?
No, thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to just wait for questions.
Thank you. I'm very concerned now. I might be known as the person who wants all the bar charts and pie charts, as you refer to that.
We know you like pie.
But, yeah, it's not. Questions?
Chairman, forgive me, I thought it might come up, but if it doesn't, if it would be of interest to the committee, I can give you a little bit of an update on the sort of office market in Bristol area, which is of relevance given one of our investments. Would that be? So, I just thought it would be, basically I went and had a bit of a catch-up with Savills in Bristol. So they just gave me a bit of a kind of how it all played out with COVID and what's going on in the central Bristol area. So up until the beginning of the pandemic, Bristol office market was really strong. Basically, demand was outstripping supply, so that was pushing up rents. And then the pandemic hit, and there was a pause in the market, but actually new lettings finished 80% up of the 5-year average. So they didn't recover fully, but it wasn't a complete write-off. And quarter four of this year is really strong, and it's looking like 2021 is going to finish on the 5-year average in terms of new lettings. So the market is doing its thing. People are taking new space, which is good to know. Bristol's performed much stronger than the other regional cities, which is great. That's all to do with its traditional tech and finance sectors, which are less affected by COVID, as well as the university, which is one of the strong partners. And interestingly, the way people commute to work in Bristol is also different. So London, everybody stopped going into London because they didn't want to go on the public transport. But most people cycle, get in their car. Some people do use the bus, I accept that, or they walk. It's a different way of commuting. So the market wasn't as impacted and is back to business as normal. Across the Class A areas of office space in Bristol, average rents are now closer to about £38 per square foot. As a reminder, the rents that we are receiving are just under 20 at £19.10p. And one very recent rental, albeit in a brand new building, but very close, basically next door to Bristol House, went for £41.50 a square foot, and another one a little bit over the way was £42.50 a square foot. So Bristol House rent currently looks good value to the tenants that are in there, which is great. There's a general trend of a flight from older office stock to high-quality, sustainable offices. So companies want to work in the right place, i.e. in the core of the city, which is where Bristol House is, and they want to work in a place where they can be sure that it's healthy, there's good ventilation, they can park their bike outside, as you would expect. COVID has heightened companies' awareness that they need to make the environment for their staff better. So although it's an older building, Bristol House, you'll recall, was refurbed, concluding in 2018. It's open plan, it's got new windows, it's got new glazing, it's got new M&E. So it's never going to be the same as a brand new building, but it's as good as it can be, and it's kind of using the scoring, if it's in a zone A location, it's probably an A- in condition. So it meets that brief as well as it can, very strongly, in fact. The investment market, not that we're looking to sell, but the investment market is really hot, and a recent sale of a BT building went for £666 a square foot, which is a new record for the city. So if you multiply 34,700 feet by 666, you get a much, much bigger number than the one that's in the valuation in this report. Now, not to say that the two are directly comparable, because they're not, but it just gives you an idea of what value. There's always a discrepancy between what you can sell something for and what you value it for, is the point I'm making. So yeah, in summary, it's located in the right place. It always was. It's as good as it can be. It's been refurbished. There should be strong demand for it. And if the current tenant, because obviously individual tenants will have their own challenges, so I'm not saying that this is the general market rather than our tenants, but were we mindful to do so and we wanted to take a bit of risk, there are definitely opportunities to gear in a stronger income stream in the future, albeit that would carry with it some risk whilst we did what we needed to do. Thank you.
Thank you. This will take me to a question which I think in some ways you probably answered, because I was considering about how often do we review the properties, and in a way you just said that because you've had these conversations with the local agents, etc. And I appreciate if we sold something and we can't really pay back the Public Works Loan Board for any due to the penalties, but say for instance something happened in an area which made our property go sky high for whatever reason. I mean, it's like say for instance in Oakhampton, house prices have gone up a lot more recently because the railways turned up, so the local agents have told me. Say something happened next to one of our buildings or close to one of our buildings, which really inflated the price. How quickly would we consider selling it and maybe investing in something else?
Thanks, Chairman. I think our strategy has always been and will continue to be a property portfolio for income. So theoretically, we could sell it as soon as we had a willing buyer, and it can happen pretty quickly. We bought it pretty quickly, 3 months, 6 months. But we wouldn't do that, I don't believe, because since the changes in our strategy to reflect best practice in financial terms and in governance terms, we couldn't sell it and reinvest in the similar market, which would be the right thing to do from a purely property portfolio perspective. So we would end up having the outstanding debt, which we couldn't pay back because it's on a 50-year loan, with a load of money in our bank, but then nowhere to put it to generate the income that we are seeking. Whereas, for example, taking back possession of the building, servicing up so fully kitting out the office spaces and breaking them up into different floor plates. So that building has 4 floors. There's about 4,000 square foot in each wing, so 8,000 per floor. You could then have, I think it's 3 on one side and 4 on the other. So 7 offices let to different tenants, spread tenant risk, and generate a higher rental income. But clearly you carry, there's time taken to do that where you haven't got a tenant, and also there's a cost to it. So not to be undertaken lightly, but those are the sorts of things you might consider at some point in the future. And I'll just add, sorry, Councillor Ball, anyone wants to come in, that the rent review, if we do nothing, which is all we're planning to do at the current time, the rent reviews are 5 and 10 years. So the lease was from 2018. So what we're looking at 2023. And what we're saying is currently there is scope for rental growth because the rent is upward only market review. So thank you.
It's interesting when we're looking at the earlier question in the agenda about the SIPFA and the new principles, and one of the questions has been about if you could explain why you've put some money into investment property, just give them a copy of this and say well, it works, so far. But then, that's good. It has worked very well for us, hasn't it? So, Councillor Ball.
I think Councillor Bridgewater had his hand up before me, but I have my answer, my question answered with your last comment, which is what I was going to ask about. Thank you.
Councillor Bridgewater.
Yeah, and Mr. Brooke has answered my question regarding COVID, so we're all good.
Like I said, with our reports and explanations, most things get answered as we go on. Councillor Renders.
Without being specific, because I understand we're not in part 2, are any of the tenants in Bristol currently in arrears?
So the rental arrears, well, basically we've essentially got full rent recovery. There is 2% rent outstanding, and it's not in Bristol.
I was just going to make the point, given that if there had been the opportunity there to increase revenue, if they weren't particularly there, that would have been my idea, but that's fine. Thank you.
No other questions? We had quite a long discussion about this in Chairman's briefing yesterday. That's probably what our questions were answered.
Mr. Brooks answered all the questions. Taking out wind out of us.
Yeah. That's good though, isn't it? When you get a report which explains most things and you get an explanation which, that's what we need, isn't it? It's just to try and then come up with the things that you're not too sure of. Okay then, so we just have one recommendation here, that we note the performance and risk of the investment portfolio to date. All happy with that? Thank you. So thank you, Councillor Evans. Thank you, Mr. Brooke, on that. Moving on to item number 11, Audit Committee Work Programme, found on page 105 of the agenda. As you can see, the 15th of March 2022 meeting, which is an afternoon meeting, I gather. I think we could be here for a long time, so we're likely to have to take a break in the middle of that one, or bring your sandwiches or something. Lisa, would you like to say anything on that at all?
Just that Devon County have confirmed that they can attend on the 15th of March, Chairman, for the pensions presentation. And as we get a bit closer to that meeting, we will let all members know through the bulletin that pension presentation is going to take be at the start of the Audit Committee meeting, because several members may like to listen to that. Thank you.
Right, any questions or comments on the proposed work plan? So we're all happy that we note that? Great. So let's say the thing you're looking at, we have some short meetings like today, and then we have some long meetings like we're going to have in March. So